Have you ever stared at the ceiling at 3:00 a.m., feeling a terror so cold and absolute that you prayed for reality to just snap and bend in your favor? There is a highly sophisticated, invisible trap laid out for us in these exact moments of shattering vulnerability. A digital mirage perfectly designed to harvest your deepest despair. And you have likely already walked right into it without even noticing. I know this because it almost swallowed me whole. I want to tell you a secret about the darkest night of my life. A night where I was so entirely cornered by my own existence that I willingly traded my sanity for a beautifully packaged lie. Let Go with God warmly welcomes you to our journey of truth today. If you find a piece of your own soul in this story, please subscribe to our channel to support us and give us the motivation to bring you more eye-opening, transformative videos in the future to understand how we get trapped. We have to talk about the physical weight of modern survival. We are living in a relentless meat grinder of a society that demands infinite output while offering zero grace. Success is ruthlessly measured by what you can display, while your silent struggles are pushed into the shadows. When your bank account is hemorrhaging, when your job feels like a slow death, and when you are too utterly exhausted to explain your drowning to another living soul, the human mind begins to fracture. It desperately screams for an emergency exit. It was in my own agonizing fracture, buried under a mountain of invisible failure and financial dread, that the cold blue light of my smartphone became my only refuge. Every night, instead of resting, my mind would spiral into a terrifying vortex of survival math. Until the algorithm handed me a digital sanctuary, I did not just stumble upon this curated spiritual corner of the internet. I crawled into it like a freezing animal seeking shelter. I found videos of hypnotic, soothing voices promising me that money was coming effortlessly, that my brutal struggles were merely a divine karmic clearing, and that playing a specific audio frequency while I slept would alter my timeline entirely. I wrapped myself in these digital spells ravenously. They were a temporary, numbing narcotic applied directly to the blistering pain of my real life. For those few minutes in the dark, I did not have to worry about eviction or failure. I only had to trust the universe. I was hiding from my own life, and the screen provided the most beautiful, intoxicating hiding spot ever created. This is the very first truth we must brutally accept: the allure of modern, internet commodified spirituality does not prey on our ignorance. It hunts our exhaustion. It waits patiently at the fragile, poignant intersection of hope and absolute despair. When reality is too harsh to endure, our biological survival instincts hijack our logic, urging us to find a shortcut. You are not naive or foolish for wanting to believe that a simple visualization technique or a manifestation audio can stitch your broken world back together. You are simply, profoundly, dangerously tired. We chase these algorithmic miracles because the alternative is standing barefoot in the jagged ruins of our actual lives, facing the excruciating, complicated process of rebuilding from scratch. But before we can tear down this digital matrix, you must look at your own battered reflection with radical mercy. You must entirely forgive yourself for reaching for a poisoned apple when you were starving to death. That desperate starvation, that profound need to consume the poisoned apple just to numb the pain, leads us blindly into the very heart of the illusion. Once you cross the threshold into this commodified spiritual matrix, the trap snaps shut with terrifying subtlety. At first, the algorithm feels like a warm, loving embrace, meticulously curating a reality where everything you desire is just one positive thought away. I remember sitting in the dark, chanting affirmations until my throat went dry, desperately trying to vibrate at a frequency high enough to pay my overdue electricity bill. The gurus on my screen smiled with perfect teeth and pristine living rooms, assuring me that if I simply aligned my energy and ignored negative realities, the universe would deliver financial abundance to my doorstep. But beneath this aesthetic blanket of love and light lies a deeply insidious psychological cage, the weaponization of personal responsibility. The true toxicity of this digital spirituality is how it slowly begins to police your very humanity. I was taught by these endless streams of videos that my anxiety, my grief, and my exhaustion were not natural responses to a brutal world, but rather low-vibrational blockages that were actively repelling my blessings. Suddenly, the comfort I initially found mutated into a suffocating new brand of anxiety. I became terrified of my own sadness. If I felt a pang of despair about my failing career, I would violently suppress it, terrified that a single moment of doubt would cancel out weeks of manifestation work. I was gaslighting myself into a state of artificial bliss, pasting a hollow, trembling smile over a soul that was screaming for help. This is how the modern manifestation industry isolates you from your own truth. It convinces you that acknowledging your struggle is the exact reason you are struggling. You become a prisoner in your own mind, completely alienated from the authentic human experience. I stopped confiding in my friends because I was afraid their realistic concerns would lower my frequency. I stopped looking at my bank statements because I was told that focusing on lack would only create more lack. By teaching us to aggressively ignore the physical reality of our circumstances, this twisted philosophy forces us to sever the connection with our logical, problem-solving faculties. It strips away our agency while paradoxically claiming to make us gods of our own destiny. If you succeed, the guru takes the credit for providing the secret technique. But if you fail, if the eviction notice still comes and the debt continues to mount, the blame falls entirely and crushingly on your shoulders. You simply did not believe hard enough. You let your vibration drop. I spent months drowning in this silent, agonizing guilt, entirely convinced that my suffering was a direct reflection of my spiritual inadequacy. I was trapped in a cyclical purgatory of hoping, pretending, and failing, completely unaware that the very medicine I was taking was the poison that was accelerating my demise. But the most dangerous thing about a house built entirely on digital smoke and enforced delusion is that, eventually, the wind changes and the glass shatters. My breaking point did not arrive with cinematic grandeur. It came on a devastatingly ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting on the cracked linoleum floor of my kitchen, a final notice from the bank crumpled in my fist, while an 8-hour manifestation frequency buzzed relentlessly from my phone on the counter. I had done everything right. I had visualized. I had detached. I had aggressively suppressed every shadow of doubt in my mind. Yet here I was, facing the absolute, undeniable collapse of my life. As I stared at the red ink on that paper, a cold, piercing clarity washed over me. The frequency was still playing, promising immediate wealth and divine intervention. But the room remained empty, too silent, and incredibly cold. In that agonizing moment, the spell broke entirely. I looked at my phone not as a portal to salvation, but as a mirror reflecting my own desperate avoidance. The rage that bubbled up inside me was visceral and suffocating, but it was not directed at the universe or the charismatic voices on the screen. It was directed squarely at myself. I had traded my precious time, my remaining dignity, and my critical thinking for a comforting lie. I had been sitting in a burning house, closing my eyes, and trying to manifest a rainstorm instead of simply standing up and walking out the door. The crash of realization was physically painful, a heavy blow to the chest that forced all the artificial air out of my lungs. I realized that by refusing to look at my problems, I had not made them disappear. I had simply allowed the rot to spread unchallenged in the dark. This collision with reality is the part of the journey no one ever wants to talk about, because it is incredibly ugly. It involves the terrifying death of magical thinking. When the universe does not swoop in to save you, you are left staring at the wreckage of your own choices. For days, I existed in a state of profound grief. I mourned the effortless rescue I had been promised, I felt entirely abandoned by the divine, floating adrift in a chaotic, indifferent world. Yet, beneath that grief, there was a strange, unfamiliar pulse of liberation. The worst had finally happened. The illusion had completely failed. And yet, I was still breathing. Stripped of my spiritual bypasses and my algorithmic coping mechanisms, I was finally standing on solid ground, even if that ground was covered in ashes. I realized that facing the terrifying truth of my failure was infinitely more empowering than living in a beautiful, fragile lie. The glass reality had shattered, but it left behind a profound, terrifying emptiness that was finally ready to be filled with something real. Escaping the blinding anger and surviving the collapse of that illusion is the precise moment the true, agonizing work of salvation finally begins. I reached up, turned off the manifestation audio, and in that resulting, deafening silence, I made the terrifying decision to finally look at the monster under the bed. Rebuilding a shattered life does not happen in a meditative trance. It happens in the harsh, unflattering fluorescent lighting of reality. It required me to sit down with a notebook and painfully document every single penny of my debt. It required me to send humiliating emails to creditors, to beg for extensions, and to take a soul-crushing second job that paid barely above minimum wage. There was nothing divine or high vibrational about waking up at 4:00 a.m. to scrub floors while my peers were advancing in their careers. It was gritty, it was exhausting, and it tasted like copper and tears. Yet, this grueling process was the most deeply spiritual undertaking of my entire life. True healing is not about ascending above the human experience. It is about having the courage to wade directly through the mud of it. Every time I made a miserable payment toward my debt, every time I chose to face a problem instead of retreating to my phone, I was forging a genuine, unbreakable trust in myself. I was no longer waiting to be rescued by an invisible force. I was actively becoming my own rescuer. The pain of taking responsibility is sharp and burning, but it is a clean pain. It is the pain of resetting a broken bone so it can heal correctly, as opposed to the dull, rotting ache of ignoring it. I had to learn how to forgive myself for my foolishness, not through empty affirmations, but through the daily, disciplined action of doing better. The modern spirituality movement sells us the idea that struggle is a sign of misalignment. But the brutal truth is that struggle is the very chisel that shapes our character. The anatomy of rebuilding requires you to abandon the concept of overnight miracles and embrace the terrifying monotony of incremental progress. I had to learn to find dignity in the mundane, sweeping my own floor, cooking a cheap meal, and honoring my commitments became my new sacred rituals. I was no longer trying to hack the universe or bypass the human condition. I was finally participating in my own life, and as the months bled into a year, the mountain of invisible failure began to shrink, not by magic, but by the sheer, unglamorous force of human resilience. I was building a foundation of actual stone, a life that could withstand the storms of reality because it was no longer completely dependent on maintaining a delicate, artificial delusion. Walking barefoot through that mud, bearing the full, unfiltered weight of reality, is exactly where you actually find the divine. I used to believe that God was a cosmic vending machine, a force that existed solely to dispense comfort and wealth if I punched in the correct spiritual codes. But having survived the collapse of my own life, having rebuilt it quietly from the ashes, my understanding of grace has been radically transformed. True spirituality is not an escape hatch from the brutal realities of human existence. It is the quiet, unbreakable strength that allows you to endure them. God is not found in the hypnotic frequencies playing through your headphones, nor in the curated aesthetics of online gurus promising you an easy way out. God is found in the grit. He is found in the tear-stained resilience of a mother working 3 jobs, in the quiet dignity of a man facing his failures honestly, and in the profound, sacred courage it takes to wake up and try again when everything feels impossible. If you are listening to this right now, and you are trapped in that exhausting cycle of hoping for a magical rescue, I need you to hear me clearly. You are incredibly strong, but your strength is being siphoned away by a mirage. Put down the heavy burden of trying to control the universe with your thoughts. You are allowed to be sad. You are allowed to be terrified of the future. Your negative emotions are not blocking your blessings. They are the compass pointing you toward the wounds that desperately need your active, loving attention. Forgive yourself for hiding. We all hide when the storm is too loud. But the storm is not going to wash you away, and the universe is not punishing you. You are simply being called to come home to reality, to stand firmly in the truth of your current circumstances, no matter how dire they may seem. Let go with God is not about surrendering your agency or waiting passively for a miracle. It is about letting go of the illusions, the shortcuts, and the exhausting need to bypass the human experience. It is about trusting that you have been equipped with the exact measure of resilience required to navigate the wreckage and rebuild your life. Brick by heavy brick. When you finally stop running, when you turn around and face the cold wind of reality, you will discover a profound, unshakable peace that no algorithm could ever replicate. Thank you for walking through the dark with us today. May you find the courage to step into the light of your own messy, beautiful, and deeply authentic life. The journey through the modern spiritual matrix is a seductive trap, promising effortless salvation while secretly plunging us into an abyss of self-blame and artificial delusion. We are frequently sold the lie that avoiding our negative emotions and aggressively ignoring our tangible problems will magically align us with infinite abundance. Yet, as this fragile narrative inevitably collapses under the crushing weight of reality, it leaves behind a profound and agonizing emptiness. This breaking point, though brutal, is the exact crucible of genuine awakening. It strips away the comforting veil of magical thinking and forces a necessary confrontation with the raw, unfiltered truth of our circumstances. True salvation is never found in the passive consumption of high-frequency audio tracks or the aggressive suppression of human struggle. It is found in the gritty, relentless, and unglamorous work of facing life head-on. Rebuilding a shattered existence requires the courage to abandon digital shortcuts and embrace the agonizing beauty of incremental progress. By taking radical responsibility for our mundane realities, we cease to be prisoners of an algorithmic illusion and become the active architects of our own destiny. We discover that true grace does not rescue us from the mud, it sustains us as we walk through it. Ultimately, acknowledging our pain and honoring our earthly responsibilities is not a spiritual failure, but the highest, most authentic form of spiritual maturity. True healing and spiritual growth cannot coexist with escapism. The modern manifestation industry often acts as a spiritual bypass, weaponizing positive thinking to keep you trapped in toxic avoidance. Real empowerment is not about trying to manipulate the universe with your thoughts. It is about developing the unshakable resilience to face life's harshest realities without flinching. Struggle, grief, and anxiety are not signs of a low vibration. They are essential human experiences and the very compass pointing toward the wounds that require your active healing. Audit your escapism. Identify the areas in your life where you are using positive vibes or manifestation techniques to avoid dealing with practical, earthly problems such as financial debt, career stagnation, or relationship issues. Embrace radical honesty. Sit down with your actual circumstances in the harsh light of day. Look at your bank statements. Acknowledge your shortcomings, and allow yourself to fully feel any sadness or anger without suppressing it. Take grounded micro-actions. Replace hoping for a miracle with practical, disciplined steps. Do one mundane, the gritty thing today that moves the needle forward. Send that difficult email. create a realistic budget, or take on a side job. Find sacred dignity in the ordinary. Unglamorous work of rebuilding your life brick by brick. Question of the day. What is one real, practical step you can take today to face a challenge you have been actively avoiding? Please kindly share your thoughts in the comments section below. Your unique perspective might be the exact inspiration someone else in our community desperately needs to read today. Finally, if you found value in this message, please subscribe to the channel. Your support truly gives us the motivation to continue creating deep, meaningful content for you.